You have found the Dumb Christian. I am your host, Jonathan, and today we are wrapping up the last 6 chapters of Genesis 45 through 50, where Jacob moves to Egypt. Despite the fact that God called his ancestors to set up in Canaan, there's a shift here that happens, and it's prophetic. There's something valuable, a reason for it. But this is that shift here as Israel, moves his whole family to Egypt. So the Bible's about to get very real. We might get a little bit colorful, so buckle up and welcome to Dumb Christian. Okay, where we left off, Joseph just had revealed himself to his brothers. Hey, it's me, Joseph. I'm the guy you sold into slavery. It takes them a while. They're trying to wrap their heads around this. Is this real? Is this guy punking us? What's happening here? And they begin to really come to terms with, oh man, this is our brother. That's amazing. And all of Egypt finds out Joseph is reunited with his long lost brothers, and they celebrate as though Pharaoh himself had been reunited with his long lost brothers. It's a nationwide party celebration. Pharaoh says, send your brothers back to get your father, the whole family, bring everyone back and set up in the land of Goshen, which is right across the street from Egypt, across the Nile, other side. Goshen's on the east side, Egypt's on the west side. They're all kind of one nation, but that's where you're going to set up your family. So Joseph sends his brothers back with wagons full of gifts and good things, clothes and fruits and all sorts of stuff. And this is weird. Like, I never understood this. Like, why is Joseph sending a bunch of furniture? Like, hey, here's a bunch of stuff. Take all this stuff home and then pack it all back up and bring everyone back to Egypt. I'm like, what? Why are they doing that? That doesn't really make sense to me. But okay, that's what happens. Anyway, so the brothers get back home. First, they find Dad, you're never going to believe this. Joseph is alive, and he's actually the one managing the sale of grain in Egypt. And Jacob, whose name has been changed to Israel, says, why are you guys messing with me? It's not even April. What's happening here? Why are you guys pranking me? This isn't funny. That's not a joke. And they're like, Dad, we're not messing with you. We're serious. Joseph is alive. Now, it's been 24, 25 years maybe that Jacob, Israel, has been believing his son Joseph is dead. So this does not compute, right? Like, how is this even possible? He probably doesn't know that his sons sold Joseph into slavery. So there's like this tension, this chaos. So the brothers are trying to be like, he's alive without giving away too much information. Finally, when the wagons of all these gifts show up with the mark of, the second in command, Joseph of Egypt, Israel says, oh, wow, okay, maybe it's true. And so maybe that's why Joseph had to send all those extra gifts to, do that convincing, trust us, we're not making this up evidence. So they pack up, and they've got young kids. They've got flocks, herds, and Dad himself is pretty old and frail and brittle. So the journey back is going to take a while. That's why Joseph himself can't come on the journey, because he's got kingdom work, Pharaoh, Egyptian national work, right? Distributing grain, managing. That's his job. So he can't take a vacation right now. That's why he's not there. They finally get Israel loaded up. They start to slowly make their way back, and it takes a lot longer with young people and old people, but eventually they get back to the land of Goshen. Like I said, Goshen is on the east side of the Nile. The majority of the nation of Egypt is on the west side of the Nile. I'm on the east side. I'm on the west side. It's not that complicated. But Goshen is a fertile land up north, kind of where there's several mouths of rivers, and so it's fairly fertile with grass. And the name Goshen is not a Hebrew word, so we don't necessarily know what it means, but some scholars say that it could be Arabic or Egyptian, and they think it means cultivated. So this is the land that was specifically cultivated for hay and grass and livestock. It's not just wild grass. It's there for a purpose. Goshen, this is the land where Israel and his whole family sets up. Now, at this point, the author, Moses, gives a whole chapter on the genealogy of Israel and his kids, grandkids, great-grandkids, because the first people who are reading what Moses is writing are the Israelites who have just been released from 400 years of slavery in Egypt. And Moses is writing this to help them understand, hey, you guys are broken up into tribes right now. The tribe of Dan and Asher, Naphtali, Issachar, Reuben, right? This is where your tribes come from and how you can trace your lineage back to the father of your tribe, who was a son of our father Israel. And so Moses is giving them some framework to understand. So when you read lineages, I know it can be boring, and sometimes you're like, I can't even pronounce these names. Shout out to Nick. But what is happening here is Moses is giving them a connecting point for them to understand, oh, I'm intricately connected into the family, into the main characters of this story. So that's where that comes from. And when you see genealogies, family trees, that's the kind of the purpose of why they're in the Bible. They get back, they set up in the land of Goshen. Hey, this is pretty gauche. Hey, is that actually the phrase? Gauche? I think so. If I'm wrong, let me know. We're gonna assume it's right. Hey, this is pretty gauche. Okay, so they set up shop there, and Pharaoh wants to meet Israel. This Pharaoh is really unique when it comes to reading about pharaohs in the Bible, especially the Pharaoh of Exodus. We've had a couple other encounters, but for the most part, when we think about Pharaoh in a biblical sense, we think of him as kind of a tough guy, kind of a dick, not really a nice guy. But this Pharaoh is unique. He's very friendly. Look at how he treated Joseph, a Hebrew slave, brought him out, made him second in command, invited Joseph's whole family to come to Egypt. And that's not something to wag your finger at. That's a really big deal. And here, beyond that, he wants to meet Joseph's dad. So Joseph brings 5 brothers and his father to Pharaoh, and he says, here he is. And there's just kind of like this picture that Pharaoh and Israel are like sitting down, having tea together, laughing about what it's like to raise a family and be a dad in Egypt versus being a dad in Canaan, and the similarities and differences. And Pharaoh says, wow, that you have got quite a story, my man. How old are you? And Israel says, 130, and I ain't done yet. Pharaoh's like, wow, that's really impressive, man. And he looks over at his brothers. What do you guys do for a living? And they say, we are shepherds. We raise flocks to eat them. And he said, Pharaoh's like, yep, that's why you're over in Goshen. We can't have. Remember, there's this kind of like stigma. At least some scholars, a lot of scholars suggest that there's this stigma between Egyptians who have more of a vegetarian diet and any people group who raise animals to eat them. There's kind of this stigma between them. And that's where they're set up in Goshen, on the other side of the river, to keep them separate. And during this time where Joseph is managing the grain for the rest of the famine, what we see is that all the nations are coming to Egypt to buy grain. But Egyptians themselves also are running out of grain and need food. So the Egyptians themselves come up to Joseph and to Pharaoh and they say, we need grain. Okay, well, give us money. So they give them money. They get to the point where they run out of food and money. We still need more grain, but we don't have money. They say, okay, why don't you sell us your flocks, your livestock, all the ways that you would make money through animals. And they say, okay, here's all of our livestock. He says, you'll still manage the flocks, you'll still be in charge, but technically Pharaoh and Egypt will own your livestock. Well, they still run out of grain and they don't have any more livestock. Now what are we going to do? And Pharaoh and Joseph say, why don't you sell us your property and your houses? So you'll still live on the land, but it'll technically belong to Pharaoh and Egypt. And they say, okay. I don't know the technical name for this type of government. If you do, leave a comment, let me know. I know I've read it somewhere, but I don't know how to Google this type of government. Okay, they run out of food. The famine is still going in full swing. Pharaoh, we don't have any money. We don't have any more livestock. We don't have any more property. We've sold everything. How can we possibly get more food? And so Pharaoh and Joseph say, I'll tell you what, Sell us yourselves. You will technically be property of Egypt and Pharaoh. And that is going to set the stage for a very complicated relationship between the Egyptians and a growing tribe of Israel at the end of Genesis, the beginning of Exodus. During that time, these people of Israel's kids and grandkids are continuing to grow. And it actually tells us that they brought with them all of their possessions, everything that they had accrued up to this point. Moses, the author, tells us 70 family members came, but there's this implication that they brought with them the whole tribe. There's a couple of things that go into this because they're given the whole land of Goshen, which is a massive allotment of land for 70 people. But remember, after Simeon and Levi went into Shechem and wiped out all the men there, they acquired a large people group as a part of their tribe, who aren't necessarily family members, but they're responsible for them, all the women and children from that town. And so we should expect that a fairly large group of people have moved into Goshen here across the river from Egypt. And they're growing like really fast. They're not just surviving now, they're thriving, and they're multiplying quickly, and they're becoming a very large number of people in this small group while Joseph finishes up his management of the grain for the rest of the famine. Once the famine's over, he's still an official. He lives out the rest of his days as an honorable discharge. Jacob, who is Israel, lives to 147. One day he realizes, this is my last day, so he sends some servants, go get Joseph, have him bring his sons. I want to bless everyone before I pass away. Joseph brings his sons to Israel, and there's a tradition where you place your right hand on the oldest son, and there's a blessing. This kind of signifies, hey, you get special honor because I'm placing my right hand on you. But what Israel does is he actually places his hand on Ephraim and his left hand on Manasseh's head. Now, remember, Joseph had these two children during the abundant years of produce. And so they're a little bit older now, and Jacob, Israel, is blessing Ephraim and Manasseh, but he does it reverse. He blesses Ephraim as though he were the oldest and Manasseh as though he were the youngest. Joseph tries to step in. No, father, not like that. And Jacob says, boy, I know what I'm doing. I'm doing this on purpose. And what happens here is Jacob, Israel, blesses Ephraim and Manasseh as though they were his own sons. And so later in the Bible, when you read about 12 tribes, the 12 tribes of Israel, but you end up reading 13 names and one of them isn't Joseph, this moment is why. Jacob, Israel, treats Ephraim and Manasseh as his own son, but because there's two of them as representatives of Joseph, they are considered half tribes. So together they make one whole tribe. They're not half in their size. They're actually some of the largest tribes, but they're considered, and when it comes to like rewards and the benefits of being a tribe, they are considered a half tribe. Two half tribes make one. So there are 13 names in the list of 12 tribes. This is how that kind of all comes about. Some scholars argue that Joseph isn't his own tribe because he married an Egyptian. The Bible doesn't tell us that. So here's what we're going to go with at Dumb Christian. We're going to assume God blessed Jacob, Israel's decision to treat Ephraim and Manasseh as his own sons and honor this blessing that he gives them as he's kind of like indicating, hey, you are your own tribe now. There's this sense that God is honoring Israel's decision to make them honorary half-tribes. And I think that's just such a really cool picture because repeatedly we see, Abraham chose to tithe to Melchizedek and God kind of adopts that later into the law. And there are some things that we see here in Genesis that we can many Jewish traditions and scholars say, oh, God was doing that from the beginning. But at Dumb Christian, the Bible doesn't say that. So we're going to kind of go from the position that God likes the way Abraham thought about tithe. He likes the way Jacob is thinking about tribes. And so God honors those actions and those decisions. And after he blesses Ephraim and Manasseh, he blesses Joseph, and then he continues to bless the rest of his sons and grandkids and great-grandkids. And then in classic Yoda fashion, he kind of pulls his legs up onto the bed, covers up, and breathes his last. Just this peaceful, like, okay, I know it's my time. And he just dies peacefully. And then Joseph, kind of loses it like anyone would, right? Dad dies right in front of you. You've had so long, and it doesn't matter how old they are, right? You're never ready. And he just kind of loses his shit and just bawls over the body of his father. And this is the father of someone who's incredibly important in Egypt. And so all of Egypt mourns the death of Joseph's father, as if it were Pharaoh's father, right? They embalm Jacob, Israel, which takes 40 days. 40 there is again a number of transition. Something is shifting here. And then what they do is they take Jacob's body. And again, Joseph, at this point, Joseph has to ask, well, he doesn't have to ask, but he asks permission from Pharaoh. Hey, can I go take my dad's body to the family burial grounds? Remember, Pharaoh invited the whole family to live there. And it's not something you just stick your nose up at and say, all right, well, I'm leaving. Thanks, but I'm going to go. Like, it's a huge sign of disrespect if you just up and leave without consulting the person who said, hey, come into my land. I'll take care of you. I'll provide for you. I will do whatever you need. And then you just bounce. In that time, there was a real serious, like, you can't just move into a nation and then move out. You're there until you have permission to leave, basically. And so Joseph says, can I have permission to go bury my father? I don't want to disrespect you. I'm so appreciative of all that you've done so far. I just need to bury my father in the family cemetery. Pharaoh says, yeah, that's great. Go for it. So they take Jacob, Israel, and they go to the cave of Machpelah. This is where Abraham is buried. This is where Isaac is buried. And this is where Israel, Jacob, the son of Isaac, is going to be buried. However, remember, Jacob had a twin brother. What was his name? Anybody remember Jacob's twin brother's name? Yes, Esau. Correct. Great job. Now, the Bible doesn't tell us this, but Midrash tells us, which is a Jewish resource of commentary about the Bible, Midrash tells us that Esau brings a little entourage to the entrance of the cave of Machpelah because he's still alive. And when he hears that his twin brother is going to be buried in the cave, he says, oh, I'm not going to have any of that. My twin brother already stole my birthright, stole my blessing, stole a bunch of shit from me, and I want to be buried in the family plot. Only one of us can be buried, the patriarch, and that should be me. So Esau confronts this his extended family as they are bringing his twin brother's body to be buried in the cave, and he says, nope, you guys can't bury Jacob there. And he's got some muscle with him, right? And then Midrash says that a servant who had been a part of the family for a very long time runs up to Esau and in one swift stroke cuts his head off, and it bounces on the ground, rolls into the cave up against Isaac's bones. And so in essence, he kind of got his wish. His head is buried in the cave of Machpelah. They don't touch the head. They just let it be where it fell. And then they bury Israel, Jacob, in that cave as well. Now, the brothers and Joseph make their way back to Egypt, and the brothers are starting to get a little bit scared because Dad isn't here anymore to protect them. Now that Dad's gone, Joseph has every right and every power, he can do whatever he wants. It's within his power to exact revenge on his brothers, and they are terrified. And they kind of come up to him a little scared. Dad said don't hurt us before he died, so please don't hurt us. And Joseph says, you guys, look, I get this is kind of crazy how it all happened. I know you guys wished me dead and you wanted terrible bad things for me. But God had other plans for me and for you guys. And God is the one who's responsible for punishment, not me. Even though it's within my power under Egypt, I'm not God. I don't have permission from God to treat you guys like that. So I'm going to leave any judgments that need to be made up to him. As far as you and I are concerned, all is forgiven. What you intended as evil, God used for good. And then he lives until he's 110. The Bible says that he got to see the children of Ephraim to the third generation. He got to see, I think, like great grandkids, if I understand that, that's what that means. He lives to 110, and as he's about to die, he says to his kids and his extended family, you guys, our family's going to be here for a while. I kind of sense that. We're here for a while. But what I'd like you to do is promise me that whenever our family eventually does leave Egypt, take my bones and bury them with my forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, also known as Israel, and Joseph, are the patriarchs buried in the cave of Machpelah. And he says, promise me that when we do leave, you'll take my bones to bury them there. And they say, yep. So he's embalmed and he's put in a casket and he's put in a very special place while this growing, very rapidly growing tribe of Israel, nation of Israel, grows, explodes over the next 400 years before his bones at that point are taken and placed in the cave at Machpelah. But this is how Genesis ends, and this is how Dumb Christian Season 1 ends, with this burgeoning tribe, clan of Israel, at least 70 family members, hundreds of people beyond that, growing, exploding into this massive nation under the protection and provision of Egypt, where very quickly we're going to discover that the Pharaoh who liked Joseph and his family is gone. There's a new Pharaoh in town, and he does not know Joseph. He does not know what Joseph has done, and he and these people these Egyptians who ultimately now belong to Pharaoh because they ran out of money to pay for grain. They ended up selling their livestock, their property, even themselves to get the grain during that process where Joseph was managing. And the nation of Egypt doesn't know what to do with this growing group of people who are not Egyptians, who are not like the Egyptians, and they're going to have to figure out what to do with them. So I would encourage you, read Genesis 45 through 50 to get the full picture of this story that we just kind of glossed over, and then get into Exodus. I don't think we're necessarily going into Exodus in season 2. We might do a quick overview of it so that we can get into what we want to talk about. But Genesis is basically like a preface to the rest of the Bible. It's just a real quick glimpse of who are the main characters and why are they interacting with God in this way, these descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That has been it for the Dumb Christian Season 1. I will see you guys next year. I love you guys. End of Season 1. There you go, guys. Be sure to check us out on YouTube, Dumb Christian Podcast. We have some exclusive content. I'm really looking forward to what the next season holds. So please give us a message. Shoot us a note. What would you guys like to see? What didn't you guys like about Season 1 so we can make some adaptions? And we're still kind of developing Season 2, but I'm really excited about what we're going to bring to the table and how we're going to walk through both the Old and New Testament again. So be sure to be on the lookout in January. I love you guys. I'll catch you later.